Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee Time at the Water's Edge. I'm Rodney, and we have Dr. Stephen Roby, and we have retired Command Master Chief Mike Fuston with us here, and Mike is also one of our deacons here at Water's Edge. So
he is. He keeps the grounds maintained.
Yes, he does.
And serviced.
Mike, thank you very much for joining us today.
More than glad to be here with you guys.
So today we are going to be talking about 9/11 because we are recording this episode actually on 9/11. Before we get into that though, Steve, what coffee are we drinking today?
Well, maybe in honor to 9/11, we have a military supported company here, Black Rifle Coffee Company. We often highlight theirs. This is the vintage roast. It's definitely my wife's favorite, so wanted to spotlight that.
I like it too. I really do.
Very good.
Although, just to let you know, I think Space Bear is still one of my favorites.
Cheers, mates.
That's good. That is good.
Very good.
I think yours is almost gone already. That's
Hey, we got some more.
Navy Chief.
It's a little better than church coffee.
Yes, that's a lot better than church coffee. Yeah, I was a little taken aback by that day of recording. I didn't know what to do. All right. So 9/11, everybody sitting at the table was actually alive during 9/11, which there's a lot of people nowadays, especially in the military even, that weren't, which is, for me, I know that's kind of hard to think about, and knowing how long ago that was. So gentlemen, your original or your off the top of your head thoughts on 9/11.
I'd start by saying this was kind of inspired. Number one, we typically record on Mondays. 9/11 obviously fell on a Monday this year. But it was kind of inspired by one of Mike's posts, and that's one of the reasons I wanted him on here. He had just shared online, just kind of one of those sentiments that everybody remembers what they were doing on that day that was alive and, of age. Yeah. And it is one of those days that just live in infamy. Like most people that have recollection do so in great detail of what exactly they were doing that day, what was going on, and what happened, and surely the aftermath of all of that. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it. And it's just a way to, remind ourselves that, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. All of those people, the 3,000 plus people that lost their lives on that day, were going about a normal day at work. And I think all of us, that's one of the reasons it sticks out in our minds so much, because it was just a normal day. And then all of a sudden our lives changed, and it was wild.
I don't think there was anybody September 11th, 2001, by the evening time frame, did not think and realize that our world had changed drastically in one day forevermore.
Yeah, absolutely.
That type of magnitude of tragedy event, however you want to coach it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know being in the military at the time you were, and I was, and Steve, you were.
I was in college.
College at the time. I just remember it was the first time that I'd ever seen a group of people. I was on the MRS land at the time. We were outboard the LaSalle, and we had just pulled in for Liberty Port. And, of course, commanding officer over what we call CCTV was giving his, import brief, telling us all to be good, not do anything stupid. And, he got handed a yellow sticky, and he said, a plane just hit the Twin Towers. We're going to switch over to the news. And it was live news. Excuse me. You would think that all these young sailors would be like so disappointed they're not going to be able to go out on Liberty or whatever, but they weren't. Everybody was like jumped to really quickly to get that ship back underway. The CO even told us you have 25 minutes to get the ship underway, and because the LaSalle has to be out in 30. And I don't think there was anybody that was like, at least not that they were showing, that was like showing any signs of disappointment or anything like that, because everybody realized that this was way bigger than anything they had dealt with so far. And I think that was kind of the realization that we had anyways on the MRS land. But yeah, I mean, and I remember I wasn't like, oh man, I'm going to miss out on liberty or anything like that. It was, let's go, let's get this thing underway. So.
What do you recall, Mike?
The morning of 9/11, I was in Civic. That's the Carrier Intelligence Center on the USS Harry S. Truman, and 30-something guys and gals running around, sailors, and the news came. Is showing these planes hitting their target as the towers, and it was really amazing to see the response of some of these junior sailors, 18, 19, 20 years old, and to see the expression and the shock of something. Here you are on one of the world's most powerful weapons, assets, and yet here you are watching planes going into towers in New York City. So
I was coming out of an ethics class when I got the news, which is kind of odd. That's how I remembered it was a Tuesday. And it was September, college. I was playing football in the fall, and I came back to my room after that class, and it was my roommate, another football player, told me that the first plane had hit the tower. He had it on the news. He and I and another guy had gathered in our dorm room there, and then we watched as the second one hit, and it was just so surreal. And I remember, all I remember is everybody being glued to the TVs for hours around campus, and that was true around the world. I felt like that everybody was just watching the news, and I'll never forget, because if you were watching the live footage, you saw people jump out of the building as it was getting ready to collapse. It was wild to see people just jump out. And man, I remember in the immediate aftermath, being so inspired by the response of the policemen and the firefighters, all of the first responders, in the days and weeks to come. That took a long time to clean up. And I was just really moved by that, because I was at a point in my life too where I was questioning my future. I was studying accounting in college, and I didn't really want to do that at that point. I was like, I'll be good at this because I like math. I can do this and do it well. But I wanted, that was a key event for me that moved me towards joining the military. And sure enough, then by the next year, I had enlisted in the delayed entry program.
Well, sadly to say, that was probably our best recruiting tool we ever had. People came in droves. They want to go fight. They want to go, see a resolve of what had taken place. So it's sad to say that it took an event such as that. But
yeah, we had a guy, a sailor that showed up to the boat that I was on that actually was a owner of a small railroad in West Virginia, who decided just to walk away from it and join the military, which just astounded me. When I heard that, I was like, "You did what?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "I just wanted to serve my country." And to see that kind of patriotism back then it was wonderful to see that in some ways.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because our country seems so divided right now and so volatile in many ways that, not that you want to relive those days because that was awful, right?
Right.
And horrible tragedy for so many people, and so many lives were affected. But I do remember the sense of unity and togetherness that we experienced as a nation. And I feel like that was widespread. I think that was pretty widespread across any kind of political lines or the things that we let divide us.
Well, I mean, you think about the Greatest Generation, you think about World War II coming right off the heels of World War I, and you see, the bombing of Pearl Harbor happens and everybody was jumping to go serve. And I think that kind of happens when something hits home that close. So that was kind of that turning point for us, or for, when 9/11 happened, for recruiting in the Navy or the military overall. So yeah, I think when things like that happen, it has a tendency to really pull the patriotism out of people that may not have originally or necessarily shown much of it, before that. So.
Yeah, I came across this article. This was written 2 years ago on the 20th anniversary. Well, it came out before the 20th anniversary, but it was locally here in Virginia, an art and culture article by UVA. It appeared in a magazine at UVA. Caroline Newman is the author, and it says, "What 9/11 changed?" Excuse me. Reflecting on the cultural legacy of the attacks 20 years later. And she talks about the political culture and even how campaigns changed after that. She talks about literature and culture. She talks about foreign policy, domestic policy. So much changed. Immigration policy and debate that ensued. And then what obviously for our purposes, religion and civil religion.
Right.
And here's what this article says. It says, a December 2001, so just a few months after the events, there was a Pew Research survey that went out, and it found that the 9/11 attacks increased the prominence of religion in the U.S. to an extraordinary degree. That's the quote, with 78% of respondents agreeing that religion's role in American life was growing at the time, as opposed to just 8 months earlier when they did a similar survey, only about 37% of people thought religion's prominence in our country was growing. So that's a drastic shift. Now, of course, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. It was short-lived.
Right.
There is an article in the National Institute of Health, in the abstract says this was some research that was done. It says, despite a great deal of public discourse concerning the effect of the September 11th attacks on Americans' religious and spiritual lives, social scientists know very little about the nature, size, and duration of this effect. Using panel data from the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health, this study analyzes the influence of 9/11 on the religious and spiritual lives of American young adults. The results suggest that the 9/11 attacks exerted only modest and short-lived effects on various aspects of young adults' religiosity and spirituality, and these effects were variable across different groups. So it really wasn't anything long-term, but it was just fascinating that so many people, like churches were filled, in the weeks following 9/11. I wasn't a believer. I did not go to church then, but I do remember that renewed interest in like spirituality.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, obviously religion was at the center because it was religiously motivated on behalf of, the Muslims that did the attack.
Well, certainly, but I would also, just my own humble opinion, when a tragedy of such magnitude, it tends to do one of two things. It either moves you closer to your Maker and to God, or withdraws you from your Maker. Now, there's certainly exceptions to that rule.
Yeah.
But say you had a child or a relative that was affected by that act, it's very easy to blame God. It's very easy to put punishment where it doesn't belong. But I think it did, by all means, draw more back to God or into God than the opposite. Just my humble opinion.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the things that I noticed right off the bat, and I say that there were people who were either non-Christian or nominal Christians that really kind of bolstered their religious stance at that point, but may not have held on to it for very long. And when I say nominal and non-Christians, because there were guys, I mean, one of the things that I noticed that kind of increased was this kind of crusader mentality idea that kind of came out. I saw guys who were, that I knew that were atheists before then, getting Deus Vult, tattoos and stuff like that. And, guys that were getting crusader shield tattoos and stuff like that, during that time period. So there was kind of like, but you look at those guys and where they are now, and they're not in churches. They're not, I think some people were pulling close maybe for, sometimes the wrong reasons. But at the same time, there were those who did actually maybe even convert or become Christians, or maybe even nominal Christians that actually did, fully receive salvation during that time period. So it's kind of hard to say, exactly where people were, what I'm saying, or where someone is. But I did think it was interesting. I had a buddy of mine who had a Deus Vult tattoo, and I'm like, dude, you don't even believe in God. Do you even know what that means? Yeah. God wills it. That's what that means, so.
Well, maybe there was a seed planted though.
Yes.
For future times or
and that's
future
true.
in life. But,
Well, I would say that was, it definitely, at least in his providence, the Lord used that to move me at least in the direction in which I would meet him.
Right.
Because as a result of that, I told you I was really inspired, and it made me question my future, what I wanted to do with my life. And if anything, seeing the virtues that were, that came to the surface there, the heroism, the selfless service, the sacrifice of so many people for one another was so moving to me that I realized I didn't want to do taxes the rest of my life and help rich people get richer. Not
good
that
choice.
But what that did is it planted a seed in me of I wanted my life to count for something. I wanted it to be meaningful, and it realized I didn't really have much purpose, and it moved me to ultimately join the military. So it paid off my college, and I could serve in a meaningful way at the time, because I joined in 2003 after I graduated. That was right when Iraq kicked off, and man, it was like. So the Lord sort of providentially used that to move me in that direction, and that's when I met the Lord. When the Lord saved me was that first year in 2003.
It's interesting for me because I was active duty military, but I wasn't a Christian yet, and I don't think that it didn't draw me closer to God, and it didn't draw me any further away. I don't think I could have gotten any further away than I was then, but. For me, the big thing was, and you got to remember, this was a non-Christian. My whole thought was being on the MRS land, of course, which was a submarine tender, being a submarine torpedoman. I wanted to get back to a submarine. I wanted to get back to a submarine. I wanted to get into the Persian Gulf. I wanted to go back to the fight. And I found that, but now being that I was on the MRS land, I had another year left on my stint there, and I ended up in Naples. Of course, that's where I became a Christian while I was in Naples for eye surgery. I started to question that whole, do I really want to get back in the fight? Because my thought process of war overall changed.
You're talking about post-conversion?
Yes, post-conversion to Christian. My idea of who the enemy was. Instead of being this blanket idea of you have this faceless enemy, before, which is kind of the way I saw it, to, okay, even though this person is my enemy, it's a dad, what I'm saying, or the son of somebody, or
you start caring about souls.
Yeah. Right. And so there was a slight perspective change. I wouldn't say that I became anti-war so much, but the idea of taking how serious or understanding how serious the launch of a missile actually is, understanding how serious those kinds of things changed for me. I would have done my job as I vowed to do, right? I mean, we take an oath when we join the military. I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the orders of those appointed over me. I was willing to still do that, but at the same time, it's just the seriousness of it and what it actually meant when you push the button to launch a missile. Changed for me.
They made us work through that. I'm an Army chaplain, and at the chaplain school, they made us work through our thoughts on war and warfare. How would we counsel a soldier who's had to take the lives of others? Mm-hmm. Things like that. And so we did a lot of study and just war theory to sort of educate ourselves on, how is it that we view this in a comprehensive way, even according, to our faith traditions that
right.
were represented there. And that was very helpful for me, for sure. Because on one hand, you have Jesus saying, turn the other cheek, and people will say, well, Christians should be pacifists, but you also have in the scriptures a lot of war. And you have Ecclesiastes saying there's a time to live and a time to die. There's a time to kill. There's like,
right.
I'm like missing the quote in my head, but it's there,
Yeah.
right? And so it did make me think through that on a much deeper level. One of the other thoughts that I had around this was, when I think how this moved people to sort of existential type questions, right? Purpose in life, meaning, value, spiritual things, is because it's one of those events that was so impactful, and it was one of those events that seemed so nonsensical, like to take a plane and to use it for a weapon that killed thousands of lives, right? It was an event that even I, as a non-believer there, even though I would not be able to justify where this morality comes from, I would point to and say that was absolutely evil. Which, if you run that down philosophically enough, you're going to end at some objective morality and wrestle with where does that come from?
Right.
And which, is a part of the case for the existence of God.
But it also came out of a religion to some degree that was
Yeah.
fractionized or, fractured politically.
Yeah. So,
that's reality, I think.
yeah, it made me think through, even when I started exploring Christianity in the 2 years, between that time and 2003, I started exploring different faiths and Christianity in particular. And I remember wrestling with sort of this certainty that people had regarding their beliefs. Where does that confidence come from? How do you know? Because I wanted to know, like I wanted to have confidence that what I believed was true. And there's a lot of religious zealots, if you will, that very sincerely believe something. But the difference between them and I would say the disciples of Jesus is that they're not in a position to know whether or not it's true, like factually true. Whereas the disciples, they knew whether or not the resurrection happened. I mean, this was an event that is recorded in history, and if it didn't happen, it's pretty wild that so many of them were willing to risk their lives and give of their lives for the sake of that message of the truth of the resurrection. And so what I'm saying is, like, you can have sincere religious beliefs and be sincere, but be sincerely wrong. Whereas, the disciples, they were in a position to know, like, are we just making this up? Or did we really see Jesus come back from the grave? And the story doesn't make any sense for them to have just fabricated it because it cost them their lives. And it's like a lot of people are willing to die for something they believe to be true, but very few people are willing, especially in mass, to die for a lie that they know is not true. And man, that was a huge compelling case for me in thinking through the truth and the historical reliability of the New Testament and the resurrection of Christ.
Well, I'd like to touch just real briefly, go back to what you said earlier and how it united us. Politically, it united us. Spiritually, I think in a lot of ways it united us. I think when you look back into lives...
Lean in just a little bit. You're starting to...
Yeah, when you look at lives, it really, united us. The military, it united us. There was a lot of uniting that took place around this act one day and how it changed the world. But really, when you do look back, there were some great things that probably came from this such tragic event that we wish we could have, kept from happening, but it did.
Yeah, you kind of, and I know this is kind of like looking into an imaginary situation, but if you would have thought of if that would not have happened, how much more divided could we have been today than we are now? I mean, it's just a thought that I've had, how much further divided would we be? So.
I think there's a difference too. Like, I think about that because, like, what really changed in the sense of, like, how do I want to put this? Like, all of a sudden, it wasn't like a magic wand and differences disappeared. There were still varying degrees of political thought and opinions, and of course, the decision to go into Iraq for many people was questionable in a lot of ways, and so What happened, though, was we were willing to lay our differences aside and to put the nation and its safety and our neighbors above our own personal opinions on policies.
Right.
And I think that's what we're not doing today. I think that's an issue in our country today, is like we view the two-party system as like complete enemies.
Us and them.
Instead of civil disagreements on things that matter and matter significantly, but you're still my neighbor. You're still a fellow American. You're still a fellow countryman. Where I feel like now it just seems like a lost civil act.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at right now, we were talking about the recruiting, that happened back in, after 9/11, and how, I mean, if you could imagine being a recruiter back then, I mean,
life was good.
Good. Recruiters. Nowadays, not so much. I mean, you look now and how far off that mark we are as far as recruiting is concerned for the military. My goodness, it's just.
Yeah, I read some recent stuff that came out on that.
Yeah, it's not good. So, my goodness.
But I'm very proud of this country in that it's so resilient. When we're put in a corner, it's amazing how we can come out the way we do.
Yeah.
And on top always, seemingly. It really speaks volumes to what the American people are about, and that something is, attack on Pearl Harbor, 9/11. We seem to unite around those things and get arm in arm and let's go fix this. Yeah.
Right. We do.
You're talking about recruiting. I remember I was kind of the recruiter's dream when I walked in. and I say that because, like, here I'm getting ready to graduate college. I already had a degree, but I was going to enlist instead of become an officer because they would pay off my college loans. And I kid you not, this recruiter, he was like, I don't know if he was new, but he was like ready to make this presentation. He pulls out this laptop. He showed me helicopters flying and all this stuff. And I was like, you really don't have to do this. Like, as long as I can get these certain things, I'm gonna sign up. And he was like, okay, good. So he didn't even have to do his presentation. I'm like, I just need to know if you're going to pay off my college loans and if I can, have these certain incentives.
I bet he still had a smile on his face when you told him that, though.
Yeah, he was pretty pumped.
Yeah, I know for me, I when I walked into the recruiting office, it was because I was doing really poorly at Indiana State University. And so when I came in, it was one of those situations where I was like, you don't have to sell me on this. Just what do I need to do to join? Yeah. And of course, the first question out of that recruiter's mouth was, what are you running from? So I was like, well, not the law.
Well, the next thing this dude did is he gave me a little practice test. It was just to kind of see how you do on the ASVAB. And he was like, he just looked at me. He was like, I think you're going to be able to get any job you want. And I was like, I think it's good. It'll be great.
Oh,
good deal.
Yep. So do you gentlemen have any more thoughts?
I'm good. Never forget.
Steve, never forget.
It's hard to believe it's been 22 years today. That's kind of, wow. Where'd time go? But that's where we're at today.
Yeah, we got people, like I said before, we got kids graduated from high school, already partially through college.
My son blessed me today. I saw on his Instagram story, earlier this year, we took a trip to New York City. We took a train up there and we took them to the memorial where the Twin Towers stood. And he had a photo of that, and he put #never forget on there. Like, you weren't even alive, but he knows how big of an impact that had.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I think this was a pretty good discussion. Do you guys have any more?
I was pumped. Mike joined us.
Yes, I know. Yeah. It was great. It was great.
Yeah, you're faces. Lucky. I mean, you're going to keep this YouTube station, I think, I didn't destroy it on you.
Well, I said just before we recorded, I said, this is a great time having Mike here this week, and we had Larry here last week.
We did
2 episodes in a row that I was not the oldest guy on the set.
We didn't have to go there again.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for this conversation. Everybody out there, thank you for listening. And if you have not done so, see how now I'm messing it up. If you have not done so yet, make sure you like, subscribe, and click that bell so that way you know when we release new episodes. If you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave us a review. We do want to know how we're doing. And if you are listening to this on Spotify, go ahead and click those 5 stars. It will help us in the algorithm so we can push these episodes forward and out to more people. Gentlemen, again, thank you. Out there, listeners and watchers, we love you all, and God bless.
Peace out.